Hello, this is episode 25th of Rambling Weekly. You can tell by the title, it's called A Dizzying Noise. So, yeah, fun times ahead. So yeah, that there is a song that I'm working on. I started it about a month ago, and I have just sort of, I don't know. I blame Senokiseki for. I had a little bit of a lack of, I guess they refer to it as the mojo, the creative juices flowing there. So right now I've got it as a working title is Ironhearted, but it's kind of my start, at least an attempt to try to make a battle theme. So yeah, hopefully it'll work out, and once I do finish it all up, I'll certainly put it on the YouTubes. So yeah, how's everybody doing? If you haven't, I did put out, as you'll hear me clicking to make sure, as I'm quite the forgetful person every now and again, is that I did put out an episode just a couple weeks ago from the looks of it here. I want to say thank you, Kid Koala, for all of your comments. The way you do it is I'll usually end up writing a little, if I'm making a lot of comments, I'll write little notes to make a giant list. This is probably a much easier way to do it, just because you can do it piecemeal and be like, okay, comment to this, comment to that, comment to that. So I appreciate all the comments and the fact that you have an old man phone as well. We are certainly kindred spirits. So I might come back to this. I have been trying to think of if I was going to have the comment section at the end to revisit it, or kind of push it to the front here. Probably be better to push it up front, just so people can know and don't have to sit there and wait and be like, why isn't he talking about the comments there? So also, if there are any catastrophic sounds that do pop up, I apologize. I'm holding my mic because for whatever reason I have to. I don't know if I just need a new one or what, but it feels like I have to be eating my microphone to have even some semblance of being loud on it. I'm certainly not a loud person to begin with, so that's one issue. I might have my dulcet tones just put people to sleep or something. It's certainly a calming effect, but sometimes I want to be loud and rambunctious, and it just doesn't happen. Or when I do it, people kind of look at me like, that's really out of character for you. It's like, no, I'm just so lazy and apathetic that it takes energy to do those sorts of things, and I don't feel like doing it. I do have to say, I appreciate the excitement there you have there, Kid Koala, as one of your comments put, it's back and I'm still alive. Fuck yeah. So, it's pretty much my sentiments there. But as you also at one point, we kind of had a bit of back and forth, kind of having a bit of a gallows humor. I guess that's a part of me I really don't, and I don't think I did it too much in the last episode, but it isn't a part of me that I show too much to other people, partly because it always makes me worried that people might take it the wrong way. Like, oh, is something wrong? And it's like, no. Like, sometimes it's just really funny. There are some really bad jokes that I can think of that are just like, oh, that's hilarious. Or memes that I've seen on the interwebs that I'm just like, oh, this is really hilarious. And my brother is, he probably brings that side out of me a lot better. Probably because I know I can say those things to him. So it isn't quite self-censorship. It's just more of, I don't want people to worry. So I'm glad you enjoy the more gallows humor there, Kid Koala. I don't know, like I had mentioned before in one of like a vlog or something at one point that I wanted to do like a review series for Redwall with my brother. I'd like to still do it. He's just a busy guy, so it's kind of hard. Other than me smacking him around at Smash, it's hard to kind of sit down and read those and then get to do like a review and that sort of stuff. I mean, he's a big history dork, certainly bigger than I am, and much more well versed in it than I am. That's because he spends his time a bit better than I do, or where I'm writing stories, he's doing that sort of stuff. So let's see what else has been going on with me here before we get into the topic at large. Doing the typical things. The end. I've picked up between the interim of last episode and this episode, I picked up Tales of Symphonia on a whim. Really, I was just kind of like, oh, it's $5, it's on Steam, might as well try it. And I don't know how I feel about it, and it's kind of how I feel with like all Tales games except for Fantasia, and it may be simply because it's the first game that I played of the series. It's not quite my cup of tea. I have this initial excitement about a game, particularly with the Tales games, and then about 10 hours in, which is kind of where I'm at now, I really fall off the wagon, and I'm just like, ugh! And it's not that they're bad or boring, it's just it doesn't quite jive, I think, with what I like and stuff. A lot of times, it isn't like it isn't at least fun to some degree. Understandably so, but I still kind of get this issue with some JRPGs where monster groups are too frequently like the same. It's like, oh, it's the same monster group for about 2 or 3 hours, and then there might be another, you're fighting the same 2 or 3 monster groups, and then there might be a slight change, and then it's back to the same, oh, it's 2 or 3 monster groups, and then it's like, okay. And I get why that is the case, particularly with those types of games to some degree, but it isn't quite my cup of tea. There's no difference in enjoyment between it being action and, say, take Dragon Quest, for example, where it's turn-based. It offers the same amount of quote-unquote fun/interest to me at that point when you're having to fight the same things over and over again. That's where I usually kind of drift into the music. To be honest, Motoi Sakuraba, while there are some songs and styles of his that I really do enjoy, he's kind of, his flair for stuff, while he does put out a ton of it, isn't quite, it kind of similar to how I feel about just the Tales of series in general. It just doesn't quite mesh with me. Been playing that. What else have I been gotten back into writing? Like I said, the creative mojo, the creative juices and everything have been coming back, so I've been getting back into writing and everything, so that's good. I have been playing the 3DS version of Dragon Quest VIII. I'm probably going to drift into doing that a bit more than Tales of Symphonia, so I don't think there's really been much else going on in that. Actually, this leads perfectly into the topic at hand today, and that topic is just the noise of everything. I literally, figuratively, and all sorts of words, I think I just put let me double check, because I'm kind of curious how long ago, so you have an idea. 43 minutes ago, so not even an hour ago, I put on the Twitters how I feel like a lot of stuff, while it is interesting, feels like a lot of noise, particularly when it comes to things like YouTube or I guess in this case, I specifically single out YouTube, is you can have hours upon hours of like videos analyzing, slamming, praising, games, movies, whatever. To some degree, it is nice because it allows people to, at least in theory, it allows them to explore what it is they themselves like about something. Sometimes there's just a innate quality that is unexplainable to themselves, maybe, or maybe they just don't care to look into it enough to be like, oh, this is why. That's kind of how I feel with Mega Man Legends, is that there is a confluence of just enough cheese that it doesn't spoil the sandwich, and you're like, this is a really good sandwich, and it works for me. Like it isn't It is certainly not the greatest of games, either one or two, but I hold those two games in really high regard just because they're just so enjoyable to me. I bring this up because recently there has been, and within the last 2 to 3 weeks, so recently to me, but in internet terms, probably ancient history, there's been the slew of the 1 year later well to dig into, and I wonder if it's just because people don't have things to really comment on. There's a bit of a lull culturally, it feels like, where there isn't, I don't have anything to really grapple on, to kind of butt heads about. So let's look back 1 year ago from there, when Star Wars Episode 8 came out, The Last Jedi. I'm going to be upfront with this, and I've probably mentioned this before. I am not Star Wars guy. I never really cared for it. Just, which is kind of weird because my father really, really likes them, but I have vague recollections of seeing parts of The Last Jedi. I've never seen all of not The Last Jedi, but Return of the Jedi. Episode 6, not really my thing. That's how non-Star Wars guy. I remember we had the VHS tape of whichever one that came out in the 90s that had all three of them, and there was the silver version and then the gold version. I really don't remember what they were. I remember watching some of them. I would watch the episode 4 and be like, okay, episode 5, okay, and then by episode 6 I'd be just so disinterested in it that I would kind of just bounce. For whatever reason, it as a sci-fi never interested me as much, and it's probably why, even though I've been calling it a sci-fi, it's more of a space opera. So I guess that's just a personal taste on my part. Not a big fan of the space opera sort of stuff, and there are certainly issues with Star Trek, but that's what I kind of grew up on, watching Next Generation with my mom, Deep Space Nine, and then sort of fell out of favor there. I didn't really watch Voyager as much, just kind of at that age where it was just finding my own sort of stuff that I like more than, oh, it's a terrible series. I'd have to watch it again to know how I really feel about it, but there's certainly some stuff that I'm kind of not so keen on, but that's the original Planet of the Apes movies. I really like those. I need to watch the new ones because I've heard that those are actually really good. Not the terrible Tim Burton, not that one, but the ones that have come out since. I've heard those are really good, so I should give those a watch. But yeah, that's Blade Runner. Yeah, those sorts of movies really appealed to me. Not so much Star Wars. I guess where I'm getting at with all this is that I have been recently stumbling upon a bunch of these, 15, 30 hour, 2.5 hour video commentaries all about the new Star Wars, or the most recent episode and stuff like that, and 9 times out of 10 it's about how it's just a horrific mess of whatever. I don't know enough to be oh yeah, I certainly agree, or oh, I disagree. There's certain things that people point out in a video, I'm like, ooh, that doesn't sound that great, but that could be just them presenting it in a light that makes it feel that way. For me, I don't have any interest. I'm not even going to watch any of them. It's just, like I said, not my cup of tea. It just feels like a lot of noise. I get wanting to, and this is stuff that I've talked about with Greg. I think he goes by Wanderers from the Past, but he will always be RPG Swagman to me. We've talked about this before in more of a private setting, so I hope he doesn't mind me bringing it to light. It's not like it's nefarious or anything. If you have different tastes and stuff, that's okay. That's fine. He loves Ocarina of Time. I do not. I really do not like the movie. I do not like the game. I'm not gonna sit there and make this a bunch of videos about parts of it I don't like, and that's not to say I don't want to take enjoyment away from other people. It's just something I don't like. I don't want to spend my time rant. Like, I remember way back in high school getting into arguments with friends about it because, like, we at one point wanted to try to do a little, not necessarily like a school newspaper, but we were just, maybe just kind of wanting to stretch those journalistic ideas, but it was more opinion column kind of nonsense. And one of the things was having this back and forth about, I think Ocarina of Time is a better game. Well, I think A Link to the Past is a better. I've always had those kind of back and forths with friends and stuff way back when, and I'd imagine most people do if you have friends or spend 2 seconds on the fucking internet. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like. It feels more like instead of trying to just articulate how you feel about something, people are trying to make a point about why their feelings about something should be validated or ought to be considered better than its opposition. You see this with like, well, that's just your opinion kind of thing, and they're like, well, yeah, that's just it. It's an opinion. Opinions are just like assholes. Everybody's got one. That sort of thing. It feels like when somebody brings that up as a negative, their kind of turnabout is, well, trying to say that anybody can have opinion on something, so there's no objectivity on something, or an agreement on what's objectively good or bad, and then you just get into this. It's a mess because I don't think people don't want to be, or maybe you're just not. It could be simple wiring. I mean, people are vastly different, between neighbors, family members, alone. Think about just random stranger on the internet or random stranger in the street. People are different. Perhaps it is just that because there's the arena of which people want to have conversations vastly differentiate between what maybe one person thinks they're talking about and what another. And to me, it just, like I said, it comes off as noise. Instead of just kind of talking about something, it turns into, well, here I'm going to dive deep into it, and because I'm diving deep into it, this will justify how I feel about it. I think it would be good if people had the attention span to do it, but I don't think it's really possible. I think how the internet is, and just general convenience has exacerbated people's patience for things, has diminished the ability to kind of be able to have these sorts of really, really lengthy, I don't want to say deep, because I think you can have a deep conversation about a fucking can in the street, depending on how you go about doing it, right? I mean, it can be deep, maybe not to the people talking, but maybe somebody studying the dynamics of a conversation between friends or what have you. You're looking through it through a different kind of prism. So, but I don't know. I think particularly with like when I see here's a 2-hour-long video dissertation about, and it's just the introduction of why this is bad, or here's a 20-minute piece by piece teardown of why the opening scene is bad, or something, or why it's phenomenal. And I think that's why even though there was only a handful of those episodes, why the sequelitis things that what is his name, Aaron Hansen, I think, why those were really good were because they were. It covered a lot. It was succinct, and it was boom, done in 12 to 20 minutes or so, I think, was what those, because I think there was like 3 or 4 episodes at most. It was nice because you didn't really have to go too much into, because I think that's part of the problem with a lot of the videos that I see now, is that they'll want to cover it together, and I think they'll be like, okay, let's watch this part, and then they sort of break it down, and I don't know, kind of similar to like how you break down a story. I think if in doing so, and it's not necessarily the case for everybody or anything like that, but when you're kind of breaking it down, you can compartmentalize your emotions for those sorts of things. So if you see something outlandish in a certain section, you'd be like, holy, oof. And so the emotions kind of pinging and redlining there, and then you get to the next thing, you're like, oh, that's not so bad. And it doesn't, it's like trying to mix oil and water. You're not really getting a good concentration you're just kind of stirring the pot for a bit, and then those feelings kind of keep separated. Or at least that's kind of how it feels to me. So instead of congealing these different aspects, what it ends up being is that, oh, you get these highlighted exasperations of, oh, I don't really like this, hate this, loathe this is garbage, but I do really like these, these other things. And I think it's possibly just the cynicism of people, or at least at the moment, where those, oh, I like these things, they kind of just get pushed aside, and it's like, oh, nope. The inverted could be said the same for people who are optimistic, or maybe too cheerful. It's like, oh, well, let's just take the positives, and then, well, these are bad, but if I highlight these bad things, maybe that will make people less enthused about the thing they like. And I guess to wonder about that is if there are aspects of something that people don't take into consideration. I'm trying to think of what would be a good example of this, at least what I'm familiar with. I've come to the realization that a lot of, and this isn't recent, so don't fault me for only now bringing this up unless I've mentioned it before. But for the longest time, I really enjoyed playing JRPGs because I thought they would help push storytelling in games. I think you could kind of see that in some games, but after the explosion of them in the PS1 era, I think for the most part they've really tumbled down, at least from a storytelling standpoint. Are there still good stories in JRPGs? Yes. I'm not saying all of them are terrible, and I'm not saying back then a majority of them were great either. Part of it's the newness of it, that you're like, ooh, it's shiny, super duper nice. And part of it's just the general explosion and the zeitgeist of everybody playing them at the time and stuff. But as time's gone along, you really start to see a lot of the problems that they have. One of those problems, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, is just like how you got the monster groups, so the fights kind of feel all the same. It doesn't really promote a sense of progression, but more of a way to just take time. That's not a good mechanic, particularly now. It's just to kind of take time because people don't have the patience for it. Like one game that I absolutely adore, Xenogears. I wonder how people would take to it if something like that was put out now. Not necessarily as it is, because of how disc 2 is a mess, but a beautiful mess, but a mess nonetheless. It's just that kind of concept of game, and how you could see these rumblings really start, at least for me, when Xenosaga came out. When those games started to come out, I know a lot of people were really starting to get grouchy with the exposition, and there's probably, you could probably find other cases where this was, for me, that's when I first started to notice it. People kind of rumbling about how the videos are so long and it's just taking so much time, and I know it probably came to more of a head for a lot of people with Metal Gear Solid 4. That probably irked a lot of people because it's like, oh, this game's taking forever, but from there it just, you start to see this kind of reel back from let's kind of not spend so much time on exposition and stuff, and that can be a good thing when you see a problem or something that's kind of festered into a problem, and trying to find ways to not make it so as much as I love Lost Odyssey, it isn't the gameplay that really sells it to me. It's the music and the story itself. The gameplay is just kind of like, okay, the end. Where was I going with that? I think that's where I was going. We'll just say that's where I was going. But, and I get it, it's a little bit different with movies because you don't have that direct control for a game. But I'm not gonna sit there and make a bunch of different, and maybe it's just not how I'm built. I'm not really much for not necessarily analyzing stuff, because I know we all kind of do it to one degree or another. Myself, I think sometimes when analyzing things, people tend to get lost. They see the tree but not the forest kind of syndrome. And so they'll start to really, really, the same before, either one way or the other, with optimistic or pessimistic sort of cynicism there, where it's like, oh, this stuff's really great, but we're not going to pay attention to all this other stuff, or vice versa. And all this other stuff kind of comes off as noise to them. When you have these two different outlooks, to make it really basic, the opposite outlook is going to look like a whole lot of noise to them, because they're they're the part of the trees in the forest that are just like, okay, you're that's how it feels to me. I don't know. And it's not to say that, people can't handle those sorts of conversations and stuff, but like I said before, I honestly feel that a lot of times it isn't done to possibly elucidate one's feelings in a better, maybe not better light, but it's just to elucidate those feelings so that other people can understand, but more as a way to justify how they feel is the more objective, proper way that one should feel. It's like similar to how people will say, oh, well, you're not watching this movie the right way, or you're not playing the game the right way, or something. It's like, thing is that without the interaction, there is no anything about it. Art is nothing without interaction. And that's not to say, add your own scribbles to, famous paintings or that sort of thing. Without the interaction between the work of art and the audience, it isn't there is nothing there. I mean, it is, to me, it just kind of comes off as just a blurring kind of noise, like visually or orally or what have you. And that's I guess that's I don't know if it's the issue or whatnot. Recently, I still have to comment on it, but I'm very sad to see that Silver Mongoose Videos, he put out a video a few days ago that he's pretty much closing up shop for right now. He may return to making videos at some point, but he's kind of hit the point where he's like, I need to recede and be offline. It's better for him, either spending time just kind of rambling around on the interwebs and that sort of thing. And I don't blame him. It honestly feels like it's almost like a siren call to get people in, and then not necessarily wasting your time, because in some ways it is nice because you're having those social interactions. However, because there is the anonymity of the internet as well as the lack of proximity, you don't have I don't want to call them drawbacks, but you don't have the repercussions of what a lot of times, unless people are like, oh, let's find out who they are or something. If you say something heinous or what have you, a lot of times you're just whistling to the wind sort of thing, and the wind sometimes whistles back. So, like, in some degrees, I don't have a problem with that. I would just hope that more people would interact socially, because I wonder how much that is causing people to be less social, particularly with strangers out in the world. I mean, you already have to deal with enough strangers on the internet. Why do you want to even really talk to them in real life, kind of thing, right? And perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps it makes it more likely. I don't know. Maybe I'm not seeing this properly. Maybe I'm completely off base. But it feels like the more people, because that's one thing that always not necessarily riles me, but it's the older generation who are like, oh, see, look, smartphones are causing the degradation of society, blah 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 blah. And then there's that really famous image of everybody reading a fucking newspaper on like a tram or subway line or something, like, or the bus or something. And visually, it's like there's that immediate nobody's talking on the fucking thing there. They're all buried in their noses in a book or something. The problem is that it is only one way. Like, it's only there. You can't comment into the book and somebody else comments back. That's the one big difference that kind of comes up, because eventually people got to talk to one another, and so they somehow made it work through war, bloodshed, or otherwise. It's there. I think the nuance gets lost, and I think that's where things sort of go a little sideways, is because nuance gets lost. It really becomes a very stark one way or the other kind of thing. Or at least that's how it feels to me. Maybe I'm all wrong. There's certainly feel like it, but after catching like a bunch of random videos here, kind of go not even like it's not even like going down the rabbit hole, but just kind of looking at these things, and it's like I don't know anything about it. Because the same thing, because it's been a 1 year look back to crucifixion of fucking Star Wars basically for a lot of the YouTube videos, or oh look, Doctor Who this last season's been terrible, and it's like neither of which I give the slightest inclination of a care about. Never understood the Doctor Who thing, and I say that, and every time I say that to because my mom likes it, my brother likes it. Not so much when I say it to my brother, but when I say it to my mother, I'm like, yeah, really, it doesn't interest me. It seems really hokey. She's like, your grandfather used to watch that, and I'm like, okay, all right, great, wonderful. If he was still around, I'd say, yeah, it's pretty hokey there, Grandpa. I don't know if it's just like that section of the YouTubes or whatever that is just really adamant about saying that, and maybe but I Twitter, I see it kind of in the opposite light, where people are like, oh, this is so amazing, or whatever. Same thing with like superhero movies. I don't care in the slightest about superhero movies. I really don't. And I don't want to. I feel like I'm coming off as old man grouch, get off my lawn kind of thing. But the superhero stuff I've not really understood much of. It just, and I know friends have tried to be like, oh, maybe you'll like this one a bit more, and I never get around to watching it. Part of it is it's the visual aspect. If it was animated or something, I don't think I'd have as much of an issue, but because it's done in, for lack of better terms, live action, it comes off as really dorky to me. To me, I can't divorce the two. I think it's like the second Captain America movie or something, there's like this quote-unquote really good knife fight. And I've watched this knife fight, and it's kind of neat, but in the same hand, there's a point where one of them like hits one of the characters and they go sailing super far, and it just, and I think if anything, it's probably because I watched a bunch of Jackie Chan movies as a kid. To me, that sort of choreography impresses me much more than having DBZ-esque style fights or actions happening and stuff. That's why I'm not a big Jet Li guy. Like, a lot of Jet Li stuff has the wires and stuff. There are a couple of the movies I like in the series of Once Upon a Time in China. I think that's what it's called. By the third one, he's like, maybe it's even at the end of the second one, he starts, getting like doing the crouching tiger sort of thing where it's on strings and he's floating around, and it just, you lose me. You really lose me. I guess if anything, I just have to blame Jackie Chan. It's all Jackie Chan's fault. I'm kidding, I love Jackie Chan. Yeah, it's something about those types of movies, as hokey as dialogue and that sort of thing could be, like, that's what kind of gets to me, say, with critiques of, say, what are they? I guess the prequel trilogy of Star Wars. I think I've watched the first one, and then outside of just catching the sword fights, I've never seen the second or third one. Just no. But I always liked the sword fights, and people are like, oh, it's just dancing with swords, and I was like, well, that's kind of what makes it a little cool. I mean, I get it. It's not gritty. It's not realistic, but it's also a fucking movie, and it's not realistic to have, telekinesis and stuff like that. But I mean, I can certainly understand the one in particular people always point out's when it's the third episode where Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting, and they're like twirling. They're like 2 feet away from each other, and there they are, just sort of, twirling their lightsabers and stuff, and then they just telekinesis DBZ style it. You do lose me there. The John Williams score is really good. A lot of those times, particularly that as much as the first movie gets railed on, and the prequel trilogy in general, that first movie, that final fight, outside of the repercussions of how Obi-Wan takes care of Darth Maul, evidently the high ground did not matter for him. Outside of that, I thought, but I'd have to watch it again. I really liked that fight. I thought it was a cool fight. I don't know. I think it is a little just noisy in that regard, and maybe that's me just kind of trying to sift too much into things to be like, oh yeah, or maybe it is just that it is just too much noise. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? The end. Yeah, that's gonna be it for this episode of Rambling Weekly. Thank you for listening. If you do have any sort of comments and stuff, put them down on the interwebs and whatnot, or let me know on Twitter. It's always appreciated, and that sort of fun stuff. That is it. And like I said, thank you for listening, and have a good day.